Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 97 of the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show.
You know, we both friends. Let me tell you why I
So today on the show, I have a special guest for you guys. I have interviewed quite a few Kansas City guys recently because I made a trip up there and did a seminar. And you just hang out with people and like, man, this person needs to be on the podcast. And so the third of the three is my friend David Littlewood. His real name is actually Vava. I think David Littlewood is a nickname or something. But he is one of the most, and I actually told him this after the podcast, probably one of the most either self-aware or thoughtful people that I have ever interviewed on the show. What I mean by that, and you guys will note this as soon as you start listening, when I ask a question, he has like a very real answer. And so that produced a lot of different conversations that I didn't expect to happen on the episode. And that including talking about like rolling injured. And he had some really unique advice on how to approach, how to go into a round when you are injured. And I thought, I even say it, I think that is that little 2 minutes that he talks about how you should approach rolling injured, how you should approach being injured, I really think is worth the podcast. It's really, really good. But also towards the end of the podcast, and it sucks that it was towards the end of the podcast. I wish I would have asked him sooner. But he gives some kind of business/life advice that I think if you are younger, you have somebody, you have a kid who is kind of getting to that age where they get forced to make the decision of what they're going to do for the rest of their life, whether they're going to go to college or whatever they're going to do. I think you should listen to that. You should really make note of that because he offers a unique perspective as somebody who went to college for teaching and ended up not loving it, ended up deciding that he wanted to run a business and run his own business. And so I think that there's just some unique notes in this episode that I don't think we've ever really touched on the show. And so it should be really good. I think you guys will really, really enjoy it. As you guys know, if you listen to the show, I have been asking anyone who listens on Apple Podcast to please leave a 5-star review. I've actually just been asking for a review. Today, I decided to ask for a 5-star review. Thought I would just see if you guys were cool or not. But if you guys could leave a really good review of the show, it would just help us be able to grow the podcast and be able to keep producing it and making it better. Also, as you guys know, we still have no sponsorships. 97 episodes in, don't have any. And that is by design. I've always said we'll not do any sponsorships until episode 100. And so now we are at a point on the I Suck at Jiu Jitsu show where we are looking at who we want to bring on as sponsors. I don't want to just say to click a button and have MeUndies sponsor us and you can make money off that, but I want it to be useful, just like every other part of the podcast. And so if you guys have any companies that I should check out, that I should reach out to for sponsorship, or just have a unique product that I should try out, let me know. And I would love to be able to do that and to be able to help point other people that listen to the podcast in the right direction. And then the last little thing, and this is exciting because this is the first episode that we are announcing this. So at episode 100, I am going to kick off a Patreon page. If you guys don't know what that is, it is where you can spend a very small amount per month to get something, one, to support the podcast, but two, you also receive something unique. And in our case, what it is going to be is earlier on in the show, I did something called Suck Less Saturday. And it was a 5 to 15 minute episode every Saturday where it's just me talking, and I'm talking about something very specific in jiu-jitsu. Obviously, these are mindset based. They're not technique based because it is audio only. But it is a very specific idea, a very specific training method, or just something helpful. And I'm going to bring that back on the Patreon page. So the only way to hear Suck Less Saturday, those 5 to 15 minute episodes made for driving to the gym, made for that gym drive on Saturday mornings when you're drinking your cup of coffee and you are just looking for something for your mind to get focused on jiu-jitsu. So if you guys want to support that, you'll have that opportunity to do so on episode 100. Be on the lookout in just a few weeks for that. And without further ado, let's jump right into the episode. All right, sitting down with Vava. I thought the place to start, the only place to start right here. And actually, this is a story that has been told on the podcast already when Devin was on. But you got to ask you, maybe you have some better perspective on it. Where did the name Vava come from and what does it mean?
Oh, well, I'm not sure. I don't, like Pirate, as you can tell, or like he's talked to you about, he says that a lot of the, nicknames come from kind of making fun of each other, things like that. With Pirate, he can't see out of one eye. I know he told this story about we had a guy got his big toe cut off, right? So we called him 19.
Yes.
So it's like I walked in and Clean started calling me Vava. And I have no idea what that meant. But he started saying things like, Playboy or like GQ or whatever. But I don't know, like, sounds more like he was like making fun of me underneath. You know what I mean? Like, what are you really saying? I mean, it's funny because I literally just came from getting my hair cut like just now. So, that's why I was like, hey, can we push it back to 10:30, to be able to meet? So I don't know, maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's
that's a Vava move right there.
Yeah, I know. Like maybe that was it. Like I know Pirate was like, he's always been clean shaven. He always had his hair done. That was definitely part of it. But the more I looked into it, the more I kind of saw it as just kind of like, I feel like there's a lot of people kind of have that nickname because I've met other people who said, oh, I knew a Brazilian or whatever named Vava. So I feel like Clean overall liked the nickname. It reminded him of somebody. And so he just started calling me that person's nickname. I've kind of done the same thing with people do, where I've heard another nickname from somebody and then I meet somebody and I go, you know what, this nickname fits you better. And I'll just start calling them that instead. And I don't know, maybe that was it, but whatever Vava means, I don't know. I mean, I enjoy it. I think it's fun.
I think that is a great nickname. Just so we're clear to the audience, Playboy in Portuguese is different. Playboy in Brazil is different just because of the current climate that we're in right now. Just thought we might make sure that we know Playboy, GQ, Vava, they all kind of mean the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing. I've asked multiple Brazilians what could it mean. They never say it means GQ. So
really?
I did see there was a person who kind of like a soccer player who is just as popular as like Pele, right? From Brazil. His nickname was Vava. And he was kind of a cool soccer player. And maybe that was part of it. People started getting that nickname because of him. Yeah. Looked him up. It was pretty cool.
I like it. So what started you training jiu-jitsu? What was because jiu-jitsu wasn't your first martial art, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I kind of started at age 15. Doing a art called G Condo, right? I don't know if you've heard of it. Which
would be Bruce Lee made G Condo more famous, right?
Yeah, well, Bruce Lee is the founder of
Okay.
G Condo, and he kind of started with other different kung fu martial arts, and then one idea that he had was, through practicing all these other martial arts, these traditional arts, he was saying, how realistic is this to combat? So then he decided to go, okay, well, maybe if I take a little bit of this art and a little bit of that art, then maybe if I'm doing some hand-to-hand, fighting, and really when he's talking about fighting, he was usually talking about self-defense. He wasn't normally talking about a sparring match or even a fight. There wasn't cage fighting back in his day. Obviously there was boxing. So he tried to take some of those ideas, but overall, I think he was trying to create something that was a system, but a system to set up for you to kind of learn how to fight, right? And so for me, what got me in jiu-jitsu was, I started in this one martial art, G Condo. It was about me. It was, the person that I started under, his name was Sifu Lamar Davis. And his big claim to fame is that he trained under like 12 different Bruce Lee students, never under Bruce Lee himself, but he got all of his, acclaim through these Bruce Lee students, right? And kind of like you and Charlie were talking about, I just watched that podcast. That was awesome. It was great seeing Charlie on. You guys were talking about lineage, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely think in traditional martial arts, lineage is just huge, right?
Yeah.
So especially when you're following something like Jeet Kune Do, people want to know, like, how close were you to Bruce Lee? Because he's the one who kind of made it kind of popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this guy named Sifu Lamar Davis, he called it scientific street fighting. So for me, I'm like, all right, well, I want to learn how to fight somebody. And that's the big part of it, right? So I did Jeet Kune Do, this like street fighting art. Honestly, I would say it probably is most similar to like Krav Maga.
Uh-huh. What made you start G Condo? What was your reasoning for starting?
Well, that's kind of like, that's a pretty big question. And I guess that's the point of a podcast, right? Well, my dad got in a couple fights when I was younger, right? So he owned some properties. So he was like an apartment owner, right? So he had tons of different units, and then sometimes people get angry at landlords, right?
Yeah, I get in fights with my landlords all the time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's kind of like a normal thing. But wow, Josh.
I'm just kidding.
I know. No, so he worked in Midtown. Well, we actually grew up in Long Beach, so I remember him getting in fights in Long Beach, chasing people who were like stealing things. And then we moved to Kansas City. People stealing things, people, trying to just push him around, just because that's what people do, right? When you're in a big city or whatever. And he would never really back down. But I saw, some of the aftermath of some of his fights that he got in. I mean, black eyes, like beat up, pretty bad. But, his story was he never backed down. My mom, who was there some of the times, she said like, she would, she would watch him fight these dudes and he wouldn't back down. And I just never liked that he'd come home so beaten up. Yeah. And there was like this one time he was driving home from Midtown, Kansas City. We lived in Independence, so it's like a suburb of Kansas City. And he was driving home and some person just stopped him on an off ramp. They got out of the car and I don't know if they tried to like mug him or what, but they broke like his window. He started getting cut up, and so he got cut up from like the window breaking, and then he came home and it was just like blood and a big tragic like scenario as a kid,
Yeah. How old do you remember how old you were at this time?
I mean, I was probably like 12, you know what I mean? Not the
so
youngest.
Old enough to realize how significant that is.
Old enough to realize like, wow, it's pretty cool that my dad fights these guys, but it sucks that he gets beat up. I mean, back when I was a kid, I was like, oh, sweet. Yeah, he's tough. He he fought these guys. But when I remember the black eyes and stuff like that he had, I'm like, oh, he probably got his ass kicked. Right. So I joined G Condo because I was like, well, I don't ever want to get beat up. If I'm going to learn how to fight somebody, I want to learn how, right? I can't just be like, oh, well, I'm tough and I'm strong, so I'm going to be able to fight someone. So I started at 15, and it was a bunch of adults in the room. I was the only young person. So because of that, we trained on like concrete floors with shoes on, right? There's, I'm sure you've been in martial arts for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So, back in the day, things for some reason just felt harder. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to say it, but like, it was more about being tough. It was more about just fighting anybody you could. So, I go into this school, and it just seems legit, or it's like, everybody's like, no, like we got to like eye gouge, and we got to like kick to the groin, and like, you got to like, it just seems so like hardcore. And not on top of that, they practice an art that was, a lot of people know it as like Eskrima.
Uh-huh.
So it's this Filipino martial art, which is basically knife and stick fighting.
Yeah.
So I also went into that, and I practiced a lot of that too, which got me more into the idea of like true combat, and what I mean by that is like, man, there's people out there who are, police officers and like soldiers, and they learn how to do these things where it's not just like fighting someone for points. It's like life or death situation. And that just like really intrigued me. Right.
Uh-huh.
So training, 20 years old, 21. I'm like, what is this like cage fighting stuff? Like, well, people are fighting in cages. All right, well, cool. Instead of like fighting somebody on the street, I'm going to try to get into this cage and try to fight people. So through that, I started sparring people, started saying like, yeah, whatever you got to do, if you got to like go 100%, to hit me, if you got to take me down and start punching me while I'm on the ground, do it. And that was the thing. I was like kind of okay at stand up, but as soon as I got taken to the ground, and this was a thing, got taken to the ground with someone who wasn't good at fighting, right? It would be somebody brand new. They'd be, I'd be like coaching them, because I started at 15. So now I'm 19, and I'm like coaching people and G Condo and this knife and stick fighting stuff. And I'd be like, all right, sparring time, let's do this. And they wouldn't even be that good at striking, but they would just tackle me to the ground. And I remember watching a video, because we would videotape it so that way we could kind of help ourselves get better. Watching a video, and I just looked like I was getting my ass kicked.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So from there, I was like, well, I need to know what to do on the ground.
Yeah.
And luckily I have this one friend, his name is Nick Dudley. He was going to college in Columbia, right?
Uh-huh.
And he was like, hey, there's this MMA gym, and it's called American Top Team, and they have Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So I'm going to go, and every weekend I'll come back and I'll show you guys what I learned. And I used to, I wouldn't say I would ever like totally beat him up as far as like striking goes, but it would be pretty even as far as striking goes. But then when we would go and practice like groundwork, it would just be like, he would choke me. He'd like try to break my arms, like all these things. And I'm just like, wow, this is a whole piece that is a lot more difficult to learn than just like throwing punches. And I'm not taking away anybody who does any striking. Like,
Of course.
I definitely feel like to get really, really good at striking, you need to put just as much time into it as you do jiu-jitsu. But I feel like there's just so many more moving parts to jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
And I feel like striking, you can strike for like a year, 6 months maybe, and kind of hold your own by being able to cover up and being able to get your head out of the way, being able to like move around and last a whole round. Right.
Uh-huh.
But a year into jiu-jitsu, you can't get away from the guy. They're on top of you. You know what I mean? So it just took so much, more effort in jiu-jitsu. So I worked with this Nick guy who was telling me about ATT. He'd come back, he'd tell me all these things. And I was like, I got to start practicing jiu-jitsu. And that's kind of what got me into it. So it was going into MMA and if I'm going to be serious about winning, I need to know what to do on the ground. So that's like the big part of what I do. Yeah.
So you start training. How long did you train? You said, what was the guy's name you were training with?
Nick Dudley. Yeah.
Nick. Okay. So how long did you train with Nick as your grappling guy?
Yeah. It was like off and on, I think for maybe 2 years, So he's the one who ultimately introduced me to Dustin Dennis. So Master Clean, right? Because ATT had this big open house, right? So they already had their okay, so let me retract a little bit. It wasn't ATT yet. Nick was training at this jiu-jitsu place, and then ATT took it over, right? With Wade Rome, right? So they had this huge open house, and it was awesome. They had Yves Edwards there. They had Ricardo Laborio there. They had Jeff Monson was there. I know Dean Thomas was there that weekend. I didn't see him. Dustin Dennis was there. All these just awesome dudes and people that I knew from MMA. The person I didn't know was Dustin Dennis, though. So I didn't make it imperative to go to his little workshop. But afterwards, me and my friend Nick, we had lunch after, and he was like, hey, out of all the workshops, the person who was probably most precise on detail and seemed to care the most about how we were all moving is this guy named Dustin Dennis. And he's like, and I looked him up, and he started telling me all his accolades. He started telling me all these things that he does. And I was just like, all right, there's the real deal in Missouri right now. I can't lose this opportunity. I can't lose this chance. So
what year is this at this point?
Man, I'm really bad with years. We gotta we need Pirate for that stuff. He knows
okay.
He knows all of this. But I was probably 22, 23. I'm 37 now. So whatever. We could do the math. I don't know. I don't know if it's possible to do that type of math. That's difficult.
I'm not going to try to do it on a recorded podcast and get mocked. It could be 30 years for all. It could have been. It could have been 9
years ago. Yeah, it was a while ago. Yeah.
So at this point, do you start training with Dustin? Is that kind of?
Yeah. So, I didn't know much. All I really knew was, all the other workshops I've been to. So I did these other Wing Chun workshops, like this Kung Fu martial art. I did G Condo workshops. I did these archipelago knife and stick fighting combative seminars. And all I knew is those type of people, right? So Clean started having some seminars in Kansas City. He started coming to the KC Police Academy, where Ethan Day was, and Jason Bircher, and Charlie was there, right? I'm pretty sure Charlie was there too. But I didn't know Charlie too well. I met kind of the other guys first. And Nick took me to this police academy, and I just thought it was normal to walk up and be like, hey, black belt, hey, talk to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm not too talking. I know I seem talkative now, but I'm not normally go out and try to talk to somebody, who's coaching, but I felt like I had to. I felt like I had to introduce myself. And Clean was really good. Clean was very business oriented. So he made sure everybody had their emails, phone numbers written on a piece of paper. He made sure he knew everybody's name. And afterwards, he emailed me, hey, great to have you in, my workshop, blah, blah, blah. Which, for me, I'm like, Oh, awesome. This dude remembers
Uh-huh.
me. Obviously now I know it's something that you should just do. Like,
Uh-huh.
if you're trying to make some money off, jiu-jitsu too, you gotta thank people for coming. So I just started messaging him and said, hey, at this point I was like second in command, at this other martial arts academy called Dragon Family Martial Arts Center. And they tried to have some MMA, but it was mainly Wing Chun and G Condo, and then some like fitness stuff. But I was like, hey, I can book you anytime you want to come do a seminar. So Clean came, did some seminars. We invited literally everybody we could, and Independence, Blue Springs, Kansas City, anybody we could. We had some really good showings, and after that, I just kept asking him to come back. And so that was me kind of meeting Clean and how I got with him. And it was just an interesting situation because what I know now about Clean, I don't know. I don't know if I would be more intimidated, now,
Mm-hmm.
but at that time, I called him on the I called him on the phone to talk to him, and I was like, hey, how do I get a blue belt? And he was just like, what are you trying to say? You know what I mean? And,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, I don't know. I'm just like asking you. I don't know how to move up in the ranks.
Uh-huh.
He's like, well, how long have you been training? I was like, I don't know. I've been trying to drill this jujitsu stuff for like 2 years or whatever. And he was like, okay, well, what are you saying? What are you saying? I'm like, I don't know. Like, how do you get a blue belt?
Yeah, I'm trying to get some guidance
Yeah,
here.
yeah. He was just like, okay, I got you. I'll take you under my wing. I got you. I get what you're saying. I get you. Yeah, I'll get you there. I'll get you there. And from then on out, I'm not even joking. 10 years easy of my life, Clean told me what to do. Literally everything, man. I'm talking when to sleep, when to eat, how I should train, how I should, work out, how I should do my business, all that stuff. He just told me I had to do everything.
Uh-huh.
Told
What
me, and I said, all right, cool. Yeah, sure, I'll do that. Yeah.
that is it, man. Just to compare your story of finding jujitsu to the modern story of, well, I Googled it and I did a 2 week trial and then I just signed up for classes. To think, and we always seem to reference this on the show when you have guys that have trained for a long time. But it's just so interesting to really think about how hard it was to find jujitsu. You had to find a guy and then ask him, hey, uh,
Yeah.
can I train under you? Is that okay?
And
And
I didn't even know that I was asking him that, and yeah, like when he said, yeah, I got you. Now you got to do what I say. Basically what he said, he was in Colombia still. And I had a full-time job. I was coaching, G Condo, and, I was the head instructor for the kids program we had at this academy. So I would have to, my only time available was their 6 a.m. session in Colombia on Tuesday, Thursday mornings. So I would get up at 4 a.m. and drive there on Tuesday, Thursday mornings, train literally till like 7:30 and then drive back. So it'd be like 4 hours for like, you know what I mean? Like 4 hours of driving for like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours training with this guy. And he would just, everybody would just beat me up. And that's all it was. Yeah. And it'd be funny because I'd like get there. So I'm also like known, like, I don't like this stigma, but most of the time people are like, oh, Vava's going to be late. He's on Vava time. Right. And it just started. And I think because I get so much shit about it, like after a while, I'm like, whatever. I don't care if I'm late anymore.
and
Like
nobody's worried.
everybody gives me crap anyway. Right. So like I would get there because Clean was one of those masters that if you showed up late or didn't fall in line for whatever you needed to do, everybody get punished. And I'd get up at 4. I'd be like, all right, I could get there in like an hour and 45 minutes. That'll put me there like 15 minutes before the session. So I'd get there 15 minutes before the session. I mean, this is early. A guy doesn't show up early. I get there early. I'd be like, hey, clean, I need to use the restroom. Like I was literally just in a car. It's like morning time restroom,
Yeah.
Clean, can I use the restroom? Yeah, sure. Go. Yeah, go ahead. Like brush me off. Like, no big deal. Go ahead. Use the restroom. Maybe I'm in there for like 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Come out. It's like 5 minutes before the session starts. He already has everybody running around. Maybe it's 10 minutes before the session starts. People are already running around the mat. And he's like, oh, Vava's late, everybody. Push-up time. And then I got to count everybody's push-ups. But I was like, I asked you. I told you. I needed to go to the restroom, man. But I'd never say anything. Everybody would just be mad at me, and that's just how it would go. So.
And in that training, I actually in researching for the episode, I found a YouTube, an old, I think it was actually might have not been one of the Chop certified videos, but it was the champion training where you guys are sprinting up. What are you guys sprinting up?
So there's this, it's called Liberty Memorial. It's in Kansas City. It's in Midtown. And it's just a museum, and lots of runners go and sprint these hills and sprint these stairs. It's a great place to get a hard workout in, especially if you're looking to sprint some stairs, right? And yeah, it was the coldest it could be. And he's from Florida.
It says 0 degrees, right? That is.
No, it was probably like 30 degrees out.
it was 0 degrees Celsius. Got it.
It was, for him, it probably felt like 0 degrees. But he had all the gear on. You know what I mean? He was like decked out and all this stuff. And he just would tell us what to do, man. He'd be like, all right, sprint this. And it's like, yeah. And then we'd have to say after we were done. So I forgot what we said, but we said something about Chop certified, or we had something that we had to all say. And that was great. Yeah.
And then you guys went right into drilling. Is that?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
I was just going to say that is something like that type of training. I remember it for like when I trained at the Hit Squad when I first started training Jiu Jitsu, which is an MMA school. And so a lot of people, they had that type of training where it was like, hey, you get a text message, everybody's running this hill tomorrow, at 6 a.m. and then we're going to all train after. That type of training really has kind of died out because as a business model, you can only do that with 10 to 12 people. You can't do that with a big group of people like, hey, everybody, we're changing plans today. 30 minutes before we're all going to meet here. It's just not the same. You can't do that anymore. But that was a really beautiful type of training, not during the training. But looking back on it, it's just something very unique that a lot of people don't have. And in my opinion, I think that's why the focus was so much on toughness, not just with jiu-jitsu, but every martial art was about, well, you have to be every martial art that we wouldn't consider Americanized was all about, you have to be tough. And I think a lot of that had to do with, it was just so hard to find technique. It was so hard to find anything that they go, if we can make these guys tough, eventually they'll be able to get good on their own because they'll be able to stay through anything. And I really have to commend the group of clean guys. You were clean second black belt ever, correct?
Yeah.
And so, or second black belt from white to black.
From white to black. Yeah.
So yeah, second ever. You gotta commend the group of guys that made it through that training for so long. Has your training changed since then?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, I used to train, like I said, I started, kind of coaching people at 19, and I did not feel confident, because everybody was older than me, bigger. So I had to be like tougher and meaner, that type of thing. I had to be willing to like throw down or spar whenever, kind of prove like, no, what I'm showing you will work and I'll beat you with it. That type of stuff. And, guys at 30 or whatever, when I was like 25, they'd be like, well, wait until you're 30, man. Wait until you're 30, and then I hit 30 and I was like, oh, this isn't too bad. Now I'm 37 and it's been like, I'm not even joking, man. It's been like since 32, year after year, like another injury. And I hate that that's something that I have to deal with. You know what I mean? I hate that that's a situation that's become very real, where I'm like, I got to take into account all of the advice that, these successful, smart, personal trainers, strength coaches, athletes, coaches of athletes, where they kind of recommend, you got to really be ready to give your 100% and give your all. And so now that, I've kind of gone through that idea of, no, I just got to be tough, and it doesn't matter how tired I am, I need to keep pushing through it. Now I've realized that like I give more quality if I'm like safer and recovered a little bit.
Yeah.
In everything I do. But like going back to that idea of everybody had to be tough, I kind of think of it as the jiu-jitsu level was, just like lower, even though if we were like blue belts or purple belts, like we were still kind of like white belts are now.
Yeah.
And what I tell like white belts and blue belts now, and I kind of get this from Ethan Day, you have to like, you just have to like fight. You got to be a little stubborn. You know what I mean? You might not memorize all the moves. You won't remember all the techniques. So you can't just give up because you forget what you're doing. You got to let a little bit of instinct, take over. You think about it, but you can't freak out in this situation. Someone's smashing you. You're in side control. You're stuck there. It's some smelly, like big, strong person on top of you, and they're sweating all over you. And number one, you have to decide, I'm not going to freak out. Number two, you have to decide, I'm going to fight until I get out of this thing. And I feel like because the technique wasn't as good back in the day, that's what we had to do. And we had to do it for longer. You know what I mean? We had to be white belt, that white belt idea of just fight and survive for a little longer until we all kind of caught up to this art,
That, I do know.
Yeah. So, right now, as far as my training goes, I want to fight hard when I train, but I'm a little more thoughtful about what I'm trying to do. And I'm a little more passive, like an art should kind of be. That's like the part of jiu-jitsu that amazes me is, you can be injured all over, like your legs can be bad, your arms can be bad. But if you decide to stick with it, if you calm down, you know what I mean? If you decide, well, I'm going to keep going, I'm not going to stress out about it. I'm going to find myself in bad positions, but I'm going to work my way out of it, not give up. You can make a lot of things work, and you can change your game, every few years, like almost like you could find something new, and through injury and kind of going too hard, things like that has really helped me understand that other side of jiu-jitsu, where it's not just fighting, it is an art, and it is about life, where you got to, like, not everything is going to go your way. So since not everything's going your way, what are you going to do about it? Situations are going to happen that you're not prepared for. Are you just going to give up, or are you going to keep going? You know what I mean?
I think, I just a note, I think a lot of times I hear people say that, but I can say 100% that you practice what you preach in that, because the first time you and I ever rolled, and this is when you're a black belt and you roll with another black belt, there is a lot of uncertainty of like, okay, are we going to fight to the death or whatever? Yeah. But the first time we rolled, your knee was hurt and my rib was hurt. And we went at like a really good pace, did regular jujitsu. Neither of us were beat up or hurt afterwards. And then that was the end of the round. And I think that is, even when I go with a lot of guys and they're like, oh, I'm hurt, you start to go and then they go, well, he's at 70%. Maybe if I just went up to 71%, and then I go, well, I'll go to 75. And then, well, I'll see your 75 and be at 110. Let's go. And I think that a lot of people just don't actually practice that. How do you do that?
No, I agree with you. There was one time I was a blue belt and, I was going with this guy who was a purple belt. And like right before we started, he's like, hey man, I'm injured. Treat me like glass. Word for word. That's what he said. Treat me like glass. I'm like, all right, dude. I just tried to wanted to break his guard, stood up. He grabbed a straight ankle lock and cranked it as hard as he could. And I was like, all right, I'm never going to listen to anybody ever again. Tell me to treat them like glass. Like I'm never going to listen. I learned my lesson. And, yeah, like I am always like prepared. Like, okay, if I'm going to go with this person, if they turn it up too much, how hard am I going to go back at them? But when you reach a certain level in jiu-jitsu, you get pretty good at defense. So now my thoughts are, well, if I got to practice my defense for a while, and if I got to last around by making sure I don't get choked, making sure my back doesn't get taken, making sure I don't get passed super easily, things like that, play a smarter game where I'm a little more reserved. That's kind of like my go-to if I'm feeling too injured, you know what I mean? And that's how I kind of think of it when somebody's like, hey, let's go 50%, or like, let's not go as hard as I can. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to be prepared, but I'm prepared to work things that make me feel like I'm still gaining, like I'm still learning from this. So, I've busted my knees so many times within the last, seems like year and a half. It's like just back and forth. And, yeah, I'll be training nice and hard. But if I feel someone grab my leg and I'm like about to, it's either, okay, well, I'm either going to keep my position and my knee might pop, or I just get swept. I kind of will let that happen and try to work something else. And that's kind of my staying at 70%. Right. But yeah, I definitely don't appreciate at all if somebody's like, hey, yeah, I'll go light with you. And then they just go for it, man. I don't appreciate that. But, so you'll see a little bit of my aggression come out when it's something like that. But, I usually try not to be too aggressive for no reason.
I think two notes for people listening to pull out of that. First, I've never, ever heard anyone say they look at the round and say, how hard am I willing to go? I think that is something that I recognize in myself that I should probably do better. And I think probably for most people that deal with injuries in jiu-jitsu, just making that mental note of, okay, if it starts to get here, I will, and you didn't say, I'm just going to let this guy submit me or whatever. Your then response was, well, then I'll just work on my defense. I think that those two things, are definitely worth the podcast, but those two things, I don't think I've ever heard people explain that way. Do you feel like after you go with somebody and you notice that they went harder, than they were supposed to, or they claimed that they were going to, will that deter you from rolling with them again? Or will that, like, what is usually the go-to after that happens?
Honestly, that usually depends on like the level of who they are. Like if it was a white belt that just went too spazzy and too crazy on me, it's almost like risk versus reward. Obviously there's this, amazing, mentality going with white belts, especially if they're tough people, they're just tough individuals. And there's somebody who doesn't want to back down. And they're big and strong. There's something awesome with being like, all right, well, this person's literally trying to do whatever they can to hurt me because I'm a black belt or, you know, I'm an upper rank, and they're doing whatever they can. And I can still manage to like control them or hold them down. Maybe I can't like dance all over them and put them in all these crazy submissions or sweeps. But there's something awesome with being like, yeah, that was a full grown adult, strong, athletic, mean, and they can't do anything. Like I'm holding them down and they're breathing hard. You know what I mean? So, as far as like if it's someone like a white belt like that and they're going wild, I probably try not to go back to them after I held them down. I'll probably make sure my day is good, make sure I ate well, make sure my training's on point, and then maybe I'll go with them again. But when it's like an upper belt, when it's somebody who I know and I trust like their technique, and they kind of went a little harder on me, it's like, I want people to get better too. You know what I mean? And if they got a chance to submit me, if they got a chance to take my back, and like before I was hurt, I was taking their back and I was submitting them. Like sometimes I'll get angry if an upper belt takes my back, even if we're going like lighter. We're going lighter. Purple belt takes my back, or purple belt gets me in a danger zone, like a triangle, and then they don't try to 100% try to finish me. Like that gets me angry. That gets me a little more upset. You know what I mean? It's like, my knee's not getting hurt here. You got the collar around my throat. Like finish it. Just finish it. Like don't let it go because we're going lighter. Like this is all controlled now. You know what I mean? Like we're not going wild at this point. I'm talking about when it's just someone flailing around and just grabbing your legs and just like kicking around, and like they're kicking you in the face or they're kneeing you in the face and they're grabbing and ripping. Those type of people, I might be like, all right, I got to make sure everything is in order for me to be able to fight that today. But if it's a purple belt, a brown belt, a good blue belt or something like that, and they're willing to use control, but also go a little harder, I'm cool with that. I'll go with them all the time. Whatever,
So yeah, it does. So at your gym, I've trained at your gym a few times now. And you guys definitely have some people that could be mat enforcers for sure. Do you ever have to call on the mat enforcer and say, hey, like my knee's messed up right now, I need you to handle this?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man. That's one reason why on the back of our shirts, our first team shirts that we made, it says protect your house. That's what that means. People come in to train with you in your academy. You got to have a good showing. You know what I mean? You don't have to be disrespectful to them. You be as respectful as possible. You be as welcoming as possible. When it's time to train, you can't let them do the thing where they say, hey, treat me like glass, and then they submit you. Like you have to show some good dominating control, over them.
Let's dig a little deeper on that, because a lot of people don't talk about this. This is not something, because things are tend to be really politically correct. People are like, oh, well, we can't try to go hard against other people. That's wrong. But in jiu-jitsu, we do that. When somebody is coming into to train, if I send a text to my guys and say, hey, we've got a brown belt from out of town. That's all I have to say. Hey, brown belt from out of town. Means. Yep. Everyone's going to be there, and they'll be like, don't worry. We'll be hydrated. We'll be well rested. Yeah. We'll be ready to go. Do you have any, you don't have to use any names or anything, but do you have any solid enforcer stories?
I'm trying to think of, honestly, man, I'm so proud of our guys, you know what I mean? And so proud of the blue belts and the purple belts and, brown belts that are in there. They all will hold their own when they have to, you know what I mean? Obviously there've been times where it's been this situation. And I know you've seen this type of situation where it's somebody who's like comes in and they still got that old school mentality where it's just like, oh, I'm tough and I'm athletic, so I don't care that I haven't practiced jujitsu before. I'm going to beat up everyone in here. And sometimes they'll be coming in just to try a session, or they're trying a week out, or maybe they just joined and they think they're going to beat everybody up. So obviously there's times where like that type of person, it sounds kind of, you know, I guess like maybe a little rude or a little too aggressive, but sometimes that type of person, and I do strongly believe this, like needs to kind of be taught a lesson, you know what I mean? A lesson in like humility, or like, you know, try to find a way to lower their ego, because, you know, there's people who come and take this serious, and they train really hard, and they want to be, they want to know how to do the techniques the correct way. And you're thinking just because you have a, you know, strong mental game or whatever, and you're physically strong, you're going to be able to beat up everybody. So definitely there's been times where we've had to kind of release a, you know, a blue belt or a purple belt on somebody who's more like been brand new to it, because they come in and they're trying to like almost start real fights or whatever. You see that less and less, but you still see that type of stuff. And I think that's very important. I think that's very important, because there's obviously still a group of people out there who are like, oh, that wouldn't work on me though. You know what I mean? And I think people need to stop thinking that type of stuff. You know, I think, you know, as far as a whole, people need to understand that we're all, you know, mortal. You know, we can be injured, and we can be injured, and physical pain is not fun. Injuries are not fun. It's not something to be, you know, I've been injured a bunch, but it's not something that I'm like proud of. I'm not like proud of being injured all the time. And it's all been from jiu-jitsu. It's all been from combat sports. It's never been from exercise and fitness, and, you know, weight training or anything. It's always been jiu-jitsu. But like, you know, getting physically injured is a bad thing. And there's people walk around thinking like, you know, they don't respect that side of what being too tough, you know, can lead to. You know what I mean? They don't understand what it's like. If they don't understand what it's like to get hurt, or if they don't understand what it's like to, you know, be physically just like in a fight, just controlled. They don't understand what that's like. They don't really respect it. So then they're more willing to like put it on someone else. You know what I mean? And that's where I kind of feel like I would love it if everybody tried jiu-jitsu specifically, but martial arts in general, a martial art that was trying to be as real as possible, without just, you know, creating a culture where people are just trying to be too violent. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's a long conversation for sure.
Man, so many people, it really can, some people don't do well with it, but a lot of times, just getting beat up, really can change somebody's attitude and change somebody's opinion. You know, we're in a small town. And so most of the people that come in to train, they know somebody at the gym, or a lot of the people are younger. They all went to high school together at some point. And sometimes you do get people with that attitude of, well, I am bigger, stronger. I'm a better athlete. Maybe I used to wrestle, you know, where we're at, everybody kind of wrestled. And one of my favorite things to do to address those things is, okay, well, you're going to roll, you know, the stoner you used to beat up in high school, that's only been training, 2 years. You're going to roll with him, and he's still 70 pounds lighter than you. But it's not going to be the same. And you can tell it's a really nice learning experience. I either learn, well, I'm never coming back here, or I learn, whoa, there is definitely something to this. And, I should be a little more humble and be a little better about how I treat people. And I think that is a really fun lesson that we get to see learned in jiu-jitsu all the time.
It's amazing. And it's like, when you see somebody learn that, that's when you're like, oh, okay, now I know why people dedicate their lives to this stuff. Like it can be a life changer. It could be a mind changer. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Just this idea of like, I'm not as great as I thought I was, or as great as my parents or my teachers told me I was. Like there's some big flaws and some big issues that I have that I need to address and fix. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seems like, you know, this day and age, like self-actualization is such like a big, like, it's like such a cool thing to be going through right now. It's like, oh, I'm trying to discover myself.
Yeah.
Man, there's nothing like discovering yourself when you're getting like physically beat up and like figuring out who are you at that point. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Who are you at the point of like you're years into it and you're still getting your ass kicked? Who are you then? You know what I mean? It's like one thing. This is like a big thing I think about a lot, especially for all my teammates and people I've known who've been doing this for so long. It's like, there's the guys or the women and the people who come in who man, they have something natural in them. You know what I mean? They have this winning mentality. They're physical. They're smart. They know what needs to be done, and they win. And yeah, they get beat up, and yeah, it took some time for them to get there too. But then there's this other group, like it's like the B group. So it's like this is how I kind of usually think about members or students. Like you got like the A student who's like always shining, is always like in front of the group. Everybody notices them. They're always doing such a great job. So they're easy to put your attention and focus on. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then you got like this C athlete or student who just is horrible. They suck at everything. So then all your attention's on them all the time too, right? Because you're trying to help them because they need your attention. But then you got these like B group, right? Where they're okay. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but they're smart also, but they're not like the best, right? And it's like that group right there. It's like the group of people who just like keep sticking with it, even though they're not in the limelight, you know what I mean? Even though they're not the winners all the time, even though they're not the best of the best, but they're there like years and years and years. And it's like, yeah, what kind of person are you then? What kind of person are you then when it's like you've reached all this, like all these reasons to quit, you know what I mean? Even you're getting looked over, you know what I mean? You're like, not everybody even realizes you're there, but you're still there. You're still putting in the work. You're still staying consistent. Like that type of person is a strong person to me. That's an amazing person to be like, well, I'm not the best, but I'm good and I'll stick with it. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I'm sure there's also a lot of inner turmoil that they go through where they're like, man, I wish I could be better. And that even shows more like integrity, that they're thinking inside themselves like, man, I wish I was something better. And they just still don't give up. I think that's amazing. I think it's amazing to not be the best of the best, but not give up.
I completely agree. I think that is it is so hard. It's very hard to get to black belt in jiu-jitsu. Yeah. But if you don't have the same physical attributes or even the same mental attributes that other people have, and still just staying in and keeping going, you end up surpassing so many people. When I started, I was like 14. And it was all adults, and I started to lose weight. So I'm chubby and I'm getting beat up by everybody. And it's a very new program. So there aren't even blue or purple belts that might say, hey, you're a young kid, let me help you. It is just all 25-year-old white belts, me chubby at 14, and my dad who's almost 50 at the time. And that's our team. And I remember specifically, there was a guy that was just so much better than everybody else, just a freak of an athlete. And he got hurt and he was out for like 8 months, and he really should have been out for a few weeks, but he had never been hurt in his life before. It was a realization for him. And then he decides he's going to come back, 9 months later because he's a good athlete. And at that time I start to grow a little bit. And I'm also training every single day, sometimes twice, just skipping school to go train jiu-jitsu. And I remember us rolling, and he was still much bigger and stronger, and it was neck and neck. And we just kept rolling and kept rolling. And eventually I submitted him. And I remember thinking like, oh, it doesn't matter that I'm short and fat. He just hasn't been here and I have. Yes. And just learning that lesson early on in jiu-jitsu, I think is something that could help people to make it where they want to be, or even find a place that they want to be with jiu-jitsu, because it's so hard to say where you want to end up with jiu-jitsu when you start. But the biggest thing is you just want to keep doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just a little shift, because I definitely wanted to talk about this. I know this is kind of your other passion that isn't jiu-jitsu, but you have a super, super cool facility in Kansas City that is actually, I'll just let you explain what Body Fit is.
Well, we like to call ourselves Kansas City's first green gym, or only green gym. We just thought it was a fun thing to like coin, you know what I mean? But we're a solar powered gym. And by gym, I mean, we do powerlifting and weightlifting. We have a strength and conditioning program. We have jujitsu. We have kickboxing. We used to offer some other things, but some of those programs fell out. We do have this like gymnastics inspired fitness session where people like learn how to do some gymnastics stuff too. And yeah, basically what it was is I had this opportunity to move a gym into this really old building. It's literally 100 years ago. It was it opened as a bank in Midtown, and we basically just broke down some walls. And that's about it, and then fit whatever we could in different rooms. Like upstairs is where the Vava Parata team is. That's where we do our jiu-jitsu and our other combat sports. And we just knocked down some walls, and up there used to be like offices and conference rooms. And our idea was just fit into a space that's already there. After we kind of grew that location, we moved into the building next to us also, and we opened up in the basement down there because it was just an empty basement forever. And that's where we put like a lot of our performance training type stuff, and like our really really heavy duty equipment where people can do some real serious powerlifting and strongman stuff also. So it's pretty cool to have competitors who do jiu-jitsu, and then have some competitors who want to do powerlifting or strongman competitions and things like that. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
And as somebody who's grown up in the fitness industry and has been to a ton of different gyms, when it comes to like a fitness gym, I felt like that was one of the most unique gyms that I had ever been to. And then obviously that translates to the jiu-jitsu school too, because they are connected.
Yeah. My aunt lives in New York, so I would go and visit her all the time growing up. And, I'd walk into some gyms, and I'd walk into like martial arts academies and things like that, just like check them out. And what I always thought was really cool about it is they would just literally, there'd be like a jiu-jitsu academy on like the 10th floor of a building, you know what I mean? And you don't usually see that type of stuff in the Midwest. It's usually like a storefront.
Mm-hmm.
So when I had this opportunity to move into this old building, I'm like, that's like a gym that belongs in the middle of a city. And that's what I kind of liked about it. Instead of like a big warehouse, it's like we're moving into whatever's here. You know what I mean? And that's what I kind of really enjoy about this space. Even though it's kind of weird sometimes, because obviously there's some big pros to just having a huge warehouse, but there's some really cool things when it comes to just, being in the middle of the city and having levels. That's what we basically have. Like, so we have a basement where we have our performance facility. We have like, like a mid floor where it's like, ground level, where we have our strength and conditioning program, where it's basically people come in, everybody has a rack. We do our primary lifts like squats and deadlifts, bench press, shoulder press. And then we do a little bit of conditioning. And then on the top floor, well, then we have a lobby, and then on the top floor we have all our combat sports. And I don't know, I think it's cool. I'm really happy that I was able to, you know, be able to get something like this. Very thankful. Yeah.
And so on that note, what made you, when did you decide to start doing it, and what made you start your own business?
So I was actually a middle school teacher for a couple of years. And before that, I always worked with, I worked at martial arts gyms, and was a substitute teacher, and worked in like elementary schools and stuff like that, just like teaching. But I was also in like a band for a long time. So I always thought like, oh, my dream job would be, try to play music or something like that. But, going into college, starting it like off on like a music path, this is another big conversation, but, people who want to give you advice, I'm talking, parents or, adults in your life, they give you advice, and they say things like, oh, well, maybe you should have a backup plan.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And at the time you think, wow, what a great piece of advice. Now when I look back at it, I'm like, I wish I would have never listened. Wish I would never got a backup plan. Even though you can understand, why.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I stopped on some of my dreams, went into college, got a bachelor's, started my master's in special education, started teaching as a middle school teacher. I taught math, science, and social studies, and then I was also a special education teacher too. So I had to, run IEPs and stuff like that, and meet with kids who needed some extra attention. So I did all this stuff, and it never really felt like what I wanted to do. But I'm a hard worker, so I'm like, whatever, I'll just stick with it, and I'll just keep working at this, and I'm not gonna stop just because I don't really want to. Anyways, there's a lot of bureaucracy in education too, being a teacher, and whenever you work for somebody else, like, it might seem very stable, it might seem like, oh, this is good. I got someone else who's worrying about all the overhead, and all I need to do is get paid. But the reality is they're also, they also have your future kind of in their hands. You know what I mean? And I didn't really like that. I didn't like the not knowing whether or not a contract was going to be renewed or something like that, or the potential of like, well, maybe I'll move to another school. Maybe I'll try another school out. I just didn't really like that. So really what happened was I started like, listening to Dustin Dennis a lot. He was telling me to kind of push more of a, he literally forced me to get a Facebook. I was not into any of that stuff, any social media stuff. And one day he was like, if you're serious about this and you really actually want to make money off this stuff, you got to build some kind of social media presence. You know what I mean? So he was there. I'm getting off the phone now. Sign up for Facebook right now. Friend request all these people. It was all people on his list. Things like that. So listening to him, then also listening to some like reading some books about like business success, or like, trying to find the life you want, things like that. Reading those type of things, I realized like, well, what do I want my life to be like? And do I want my life to be this feeling of not really knowing, who's in control of where I go and what I do? So I was like, all right, well, let's look at this. Let's look at what could I potentially have to be able to sell? What do I potentially have to be able to ask somebody to pay me for? And I was like, Oh crap. I've been doing martial arts since like 15 years old. Here I am
Uh-huh.
like 27. You know what I mean? I've also been doing all this like personal training stuff. I've managed a gym. I was also another like assistant manager type person who like really ran a huge program at another like boot camp facility. And I would ask, and I was running the head instructor for this martial arts academy. And I asked these owners, and I said, hey, like, I would like to be like a partner with you or something. Like, I need something else. I need to. Now that I realize that I've been doing this for a while, that I've been doing martial arts for a while, that I have this knowledge, I was like, hey, can I do some like can I do something else to like potentially make a future for me here? And nobody was really willing to do that. So then I was just like, all right, well, I'm gonna try to open my own thing, and that was kind of what got me going on it. It wasn't that I was like, oh, I just like want to sell martial arts, or like, oh, I just want to sell, fitness. Or even that this is I don't like to like label myself and be like, oh, my passion is XYZ. You know what I mean? Because I just like stuff, and I stay committed to things. They don't have to be my full identity. You know what I mean? Or at least I try to not, even though it becomes that after a while. But I was like, okay, well, I have all this knowledge, and I guess I could just kind of open my own place, and uh, this can be a way for me to get the life I want to have. And ultimately, the life I wanted to have was a life of like being a little more in control. You know what I mean? A life of like feeling like I was having fun. And you run Jiu Jitsu. It's fun, right?
It is. It's very fun.
You do this stuff too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just felt that was the kind of life I wanted to have. And if I wanted to have that type of life, it's not really about the money I'm making, I guess. You know what I mean? Because I'll feel rich if it's the life I want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'll feel great if I'm happy with what I do. And so then that's what happened. And I support anybody who wants to do something like that. Like, I think that's what you should do. You should think about your life. You should think about, what do I want to get out of this life? What do I want to experience? How do I want my life to be? You should make decisions kind of based off that criteria. You know what I mean? If it's you want to make tons of money, then cool. You could go down a corporate route or something like that.
I think that is noting what you said in the very beginning, just about how hey, have a backup plan really wasn't good advice. It wasn't advice that, because you look at it like this: if you are 18 years old and you say, hey, I have no idea what I want to do, everyone will tell you, oh, well, go to college, get in some debt, go to college. If you are 18 years old and you say, I know exactly what I want to do, and it does not require college, everyone will tell you, go to college.
You're exactly right.
And there is, obviously, when I was 18, I started my school at 21, or 20, maybe I just turned 22. But when I was 18, I was 100% on, I'm going to get good at jiu-jitsu so I can teach jiu-jitsu for the rest of my life. And the amount of advice that I got from people that were, first, unhappy, second, they hated their job, third, they didn't make as much money as they wish they did, they all tried to give me advice. And I remember, luckily I had my dad who is anybody who's a small business owner, they're a small business owner because they're a rebel. They don't want to be told what to do. And my dad was like, hey, you gotta make your own. You got to do what you think. And I just remember so many people saying, well, you should at least go and get a business degree. And what stupid advice are they going to check my business degree when I go to open my gym? And yeah, it's just there's so much bad advice out there to kids nowadays. And it is tough to see, you know, I'm sure you have it too. You have young kids that come into the gym. They obviously don't want to be put on the path that they are getting pushed towards. And, you know, a lot of times you try to not be like, hey, your parents might be wrong in this situation, but it's also good to kind of sometimes tell kids, hey, your parents could be wrong in this situation.
Yeah. I mean, no, you're right. Like I'll end up like alluding to an idea of like, you know, hey, like you got some talents, like think about those, like do those things, do what you love, do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the amount of like sideways looks, not from the person I'm talking to, but other people of like, don't say that. That's don't, no. You're going to set them up for failure or something like that. The amount of, it makes you want to stop like saying that so often. And that's what I realized. And that's what I try to like tell people who get advice from other people who aren't happy and took like a safer route. Is like, I'm like, no, listen, these people who are telling you this idea of a backup plan, they love you. They love you for real. They love you so much that they don't care if you're succeeding. They love you so much that you can fail and not be happy, and they still love you. They love you so much that if you do fail, they hurt. They hurt inside. So because they hurt inside, their advice is don't do it. Don't do it because you might fail. And they're more afraid of it, of you failing, than you are. And then that's what you got to do. You kind of just got to be like, I got to ignore some of this stuff. And then you got to go make friends who have done it themselves. So that was another big piece to it. I was like, I got to stop talking to these people who tell me to do other things. I got to go talk to people who are successful and ask them successful in their own business, right? Not the people who are struggling, because that's another side of things too.
Yeah.
Because there were people who were doing their own thing and they're struggling and they're like, don't, I would not do that right now. I would not open a gym right now. I'm not doing well. But then there was people who were like, my business partner is one of them, like Clean is one of them. You know, the guy get my hair cut from, he was another guy. He owns his salon. You know, it's my friend Brett, who does Jiu Jitsu with us. He owns like real estate stuff. And they were people who were successful and have been there and have made their own thing. They're the ones who like really were like, yeah, do it. And I tell people all the time, I'll tell people to, hey, go after your dream, go after what you're doing. And I'll legit be like, if an idiot like me can do this and you're smarter than me, you're better looking than me, you can do it better than me. If I can do it, you can do it. Come on, you know, like, so, you know, that was, it's funny how that is. It's funny because you wonder where it comes from. You know what I mean? You wonder where the idea of no, you got to fall in line comes from, even with the people who you would never expect that from. You know what I mean? They're telling you to fall in line, you know, and yeah, it takes some courage not to listen to those people. But that's why I would suggest, like, go find the people who have done it. Go read the books, because guess what? These books are usually written by people who have done it, and they have some knowledge in there. And you know, after a while, I had a conversation with a student before, you know, about this idea where I was like, you know, he said something like, well, I gotta like listen to myself, and if I'm feeling like not sure about something, I gotta listen to that. And I was like, well, what if your thoughts are wrong? Like, what if like, you're not there. You're not in the place you want to be. So why are you listening to your own advice? Maybe you got to go out. You got to study. You got to take some other people's advice first. Try to apply that. Then it becomes your experience. And then you can base whatever your inner thoughts are off that. Maybe that whole idea of following your instinct, maybe that should come after you lived a life of really, really, really risking some things. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense to me. I think that, so on that note, there's a quote, I don't remember who it was, but it's something along the lines of like, the most dangerous thing a person can do is believe every thought that they have. And I think that
That's cool.
it's so easy to think, to not realize that your thoughts are very influenced by your experiences and the things that you've done. So if you're going into jiu-jitsu and you have certain thoughts about it, most likely you're wrong. Just because you think it does not mean it is true. And it's so hard for people to admit that they were wrong. When you have done jiu-jitsu for a long time, you should get to a point where you're like, yeah, I'm wrong most of the time, but I start to learn how to find at least one right answer. I start to learn how to find and know that that is truth. And it's just a different mentality. It's a different, it's just a different thing for a lot of people.
It gets scary, huh? Like the longer you do jujitsu, the more you realize you don't know. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I'm learning more and more how much I need to practice, how much I need to work. And it gets kind of scary because the more knowledge you gain on it, the more your questions become a little more specific. And then you start realizing, oh man, I got a bunch of questions. And it gets gets daunting. You know what I mean? And then sometimes I'm sitting there, I'm watching people train, I'm watching people do their technique. And I'm just like, how can I beat anybody? Like, this is like wild. Like, I don't know anything, you know what I mean? And then that's also why you go train. Cause then you're like, okay, wait, no, I do know some stuff, I guess, you know what I mean? But there's times where you're just, I know for me, I'm just like, wow, there's so much I have to work still. And if I've been doing it this long and there's still so much I need to work, it's like, it's kind of scary. You know?
It does. I completely agree with that. So I have two questions left. First up is, what instrument did you play and what type of music did you play in your band?
Well, I'm like classically trained in like violin. So I played violin since I was like in like 5th grade. I played it all the way up until like, I don't know, like 25 years old. And I just like stopped. I don't know. You could probably give me a violin now and I'd be able to like play some things, but probably would not sound that great. So I played that. And then from that, I learned how to play, the guitar stuff, guitar, bass guitar, could play the piano. And so in my bands, I played like a variety of bass guitar, guitar and, piano. And I usually sang. So the band I was in the longest, I was the lead singer and the bass guitar player for it. Yeah.
What type of music was it?
It was, I don't know, I guess like indie rock.
Okay.
We tried to be punk at first, that's what I kind of wanted. I wanted like to be aggressive, but also like it was like the beginnings of like emo. You know what I mean? Where it's like, you're still talking about like emotional stuff, but the rhythms are all fast and you're trying to break your guitar. You're playing it so hard. At the end of the shows, I would usually like throw my bass guitar and we'd like push over speakers and stupid stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah.
What was the band name?
That band was called Stewart. That was a band that I was in probably the longest. We went on like a little tour and stuff like that. And then my most recent band that I was just playing, background vocals and playing keyboard on is called Fathers. And that band, you could probably, they were before the pandemic, every week they were playing it on local Kansas City radio stations. And I think probably you could hear it in Lawrence and stuff like that. So we're on the Homegrown Buzz a lot. So that's a major station in Kansas City. And then, we're on some local indie rock radio stations too. And I know they played us at some college towns too. Yeah. You can find us on like all the streaming platforms. Fathers. Yeah.
That is awesome. Is it Fathers like plural, not with an apostrophe, right?
Yeah, father's plural. Yeah.
All
Like
right.
more than one father. Yeah.
All right. Sweet. I will
And
definitely.
Brooke, my wife, is in it too. So if you, she's a really good singer. She's really good. Not only is she great at jujitsu and amazing at jujitsu, like she's really talented in a lot of different things, and she's really good at singing. Her whole family is really good at singing. It's pretty amazing.
That's awesome. I will be sure to check out Fathers then.
Yeah.
So, last question. This is always our finisher on the show. I am at a Vava seminar, and you're doing question and answer, and I am a blue belt. And so I ask you, I raise my hand during the question and answer, and I say, Vava, I suck at jujitsu. How do I suck less at jujitsu?
And we're talking in front of everybody.
In front of everybody.
Okay. So I guess what I would probably do is talk about maybe your original goals, right? So you got to go over like your whys. You know, why are you doing jiu-jitsu? What's the purpose of it? You know what I mean? Like if you want to be a competitor or something, that's obviously going to change how you get better. You know, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But if you're just doing it for just, you know, a fun activity and a hobby, you know, obviously that changes your goal. So it has to change how you get better. So first I would go over like your whys. Why are you doing this? And then I would talk about different variables that you can actually affect in your training. So there are certain things that we can always be in control of. You know, attitude is one of them. You know what I mean? So the amount of when you're showing up to a session, like how focused are you on the technique? How focused are you on, you know, trying to drill hard and then train hard? But then also your effort, right? We could also all control our effort. And obviously that effort has a lot to do with other variables, you know, the effort in fighting out of side control. You know what I mean? How hard are you trying to get out of that? But also the effort in studying after, showing up early on the days you can. Are there other sessions that you can make it in? You got to really assess those things. So let's say it's somebody who can't really make it too often. You know, I would have a real conversation with them about their true effort if they just, you know, can't ever make it, and priorities and stuff like that. But as far as like learning jujitsu and the actual technical side of it and the combative side of it, I would say, yeah, what area do you feel most comfortable in? And take that as kind of like your variable, and then try to stay focused on that specific idea or concept, and try to really drill over that and really understand if it's like deep half, or you know what I mean? Really understand deep half and what's going on there, and spend your time doing that, because trackable progress and data is pretty important. So you try the same sweep over and over, you're going to find things that are working better when you move a certain way, right? So even though everybody in the room will start to know what you're doing, it's really good to stay kind of, I wouldn't say like one track minded, but really choose something that you're going to try to go for every time. Like really try to develop a skill, and then track your progress on how often it's working, and then assess it that way. You know what I mean? I think that's pretty important. You could always, you know, we obviously have students who want to know everything, and they want to know every position that there is. But that's really, really hard to do, because your mind still has to remember everything. So since your mind is in the equation here, we got to simplify. Sorry, that's probably a way longer answer.
No, it's perfect.
For for a seminar. But that's what I would say ultimately is, if you don't have a lot of extra time, like you got to do your study in at least one specific area and then really track if it's working or not. You know what I mean? You have to be realistic. You have to be realistic with yourself. And, I'll see some people who I think they're kind of mindlessly trying to go for some things. They're not really trying to assess. And if you break it down that way, then, you know what I mean? Then I feel like people can see their progress. And I feel like seeing your progress is very hard in jiu-jitsu, but it's imperative. Because your progress is the only thing that's going to keep true motivation. You know what I mean? If you can't see how you're getting better, if you can't realize it at least and understand what factors are helping you, you start to just like reach that slump where you're just like, nothing works and I suck. And you know what I mean? And then you feel like pretty just down about it all. And when you start feeling that way, it's hard to keep motivation, to keep coming. Without motivation, there's no consistency, right? And then without consistency, you're not learning anything. So that's why I kind of feel it's important to kind of track a progress in a specific area of jiu-jitsu. Maybe you're, sorry.
That's perfect. That is, I feel like that is one of the least done things in jiu-jitsu is people think of jiu-jitsu as a whole and not as a bunch of different positions like it really is. And you can, technically, if you really want to look at it, everyone kind of sucks at jiu-jitsu. Nobody is perfectly well-rounded. And so just being able to track a specific position, I think is just a perfect advice for my blue belt self that sucks at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. I mean, that's feels like all I can really latch on to sometimes is, okay, well, I'm kind of okay in this area. So you could branch out and try new things, experiment with other techniques. But if you're getting beat up, you can go back to that one area you're kind of good at. You got to find that area. And I guess that's where the journey is. And that's how you start feeling better at jiu-jitsu. And I guess if you're feeling better at jiu-jitsu, you'll start sucking less.
That is really good advice. So if anyone wanted to keep up with you, follow you on anything, how would they go about that?
Instagram is David Vava. Facebook is David Vava Littlewood. You can follow Body Fit Kansas City. That's Instagram. That'd be pretty cool. Hit up Pirate, if you've seen him on other stuff, like him and I always train with each other. So very easy to get a hold of me. That's
cool. And just a note on it. If anyone is in the Kansas City area, I highly recommend checking out Vava Parata. That is a excellent gym. I've been a few times and enjoyed it every single time I've been.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
For sure, man. For sure. Anything you want to say to finish?
Yeah, I just, man, thankful for you to have me on here. And man, I can't say enough, like how grateful I am to training with my guys, training with, Parata, Devin, training with Charlie, training with all these guys that I've known throughout the years, being able to talk to you really makes me, happy that I can look back and kind of think about all these people that I know and all these, all this awesome training that I've gotten, Travis Conley and, these people where they've really helped me. So there's a lot of good people here in jiu-jitsu. I mean, in Kansas City and in the Midwest. And I think it's awesome that, Pirate hooked me up with you and we're just building this like, this bigger group, man. So I'm excited, man. And I appreciate you doing this. So
Me too, man. I hope to look back on this episode 2 years from now and be like, man, remember how small the affiliation and the team was and getting to grow it from there. I think that will be really cool.
Awesome, man.
Thank you for being on, man.
No, thank you.
And that is the episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I did. And of course, if you guys are wondering, I checked out Vava's band, Fathers. And let me just make a quick note for you guys. There are 2 bands named Fathers on Spotify. I assumed that it was the first one and I clicked it and I was like, okay, the T is an upside down cross. That wasn't what I was expecting. And very, very Satan worshiping band. And I was like, whoa, he didn't, I guess to each their own, but he didn't give off that vibe to me. This doesn't feel very indie rock. And then I realized that it wasn't the right band. And so it is, at least on my Spotify, when I was on the search bar, it is the second one. It is the music that is very indie rock. And if you like indie rock, it is excellent. You guys should definitely check out Fathers. But if you guys have not already, if you guys forgot at the beginning of the show, because I asked you, could you please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts? Please do it. Don't forget. In the episode right now, I don't have anything else valuable to say. So if you guys could do that, please do it. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. As always, if you guys have any notes, if you want to mention anything about the podcast, you can message me on Instagram at the Josh McKinney, or you can email me, josh@simplifyingjujitsu.com. And that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Hope you guys got something out of it. Hope you guys check out Fathers. It's a really good band. And most importantly, I hope that it helps you suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu.